today's video, I wanted to share a little bit of my creative process and take you behind the scenes in my recent shoot in Kona, Hawaii. Wow, look at this view. I'm going to break this down into 4 key elements because there's a lot that's involved in the creative process. I'm going to show you how I come up with the client's story, how we then turn those stories into characters and plots, and how to actually capture those story points on location. I'll also share the behind the scenes on how I prep the client pre-interview because let's face it, most of us are not super comfortable on camera. So I'll walk you through how I warm up the client, get them comfortable, as well as how I direct them actually on location so they look glorious in their final B-roll footage. If you want to find out more about my brand videography process, make sure to check out the Brand Films link in the description. And if this creative process is something you're interested in learning more about, then keep on watching. So the first step that I take all my video clients through is the story distillation process. This is an in-depth questionnaire that really allows me to see the client through a 3D lens. Their past, their dreams, their vision, their challenges, all of it is given to me in this Google Doc form. And I go through it to really pick up the patterns and the stories and the themes that we can then bring to life in their video. I'm paying attention to the important humanistic themes that I know are also going to resonate with her audience. And really for many of us universally, because as humans, we are going to care about these universal themes of overcoming challenges, of having a bigger dream, of having a vision, of moving through something that changes you forever. And these are ultimately the themes and story beats that I'm looking for in their distillation homework. And after I've selected a few key storylines, I like to think of the storytelling process in terms of the archetypes. And for those of you who are not familiar with my video archetypes, definitely check out the guide of archetypes of video magnetism that I've included in the description. That will walk you through the 4 key video archetypes that I kind of shape the story and the characters around. Because every great story needs to have characters that allows the viewer to then follow their transformation. And while the client themselves does not need to necessarily tell the story through a linear story arc or a hero's journey story arc, it is important that we select key ideas, in my case, using the archetypes that can help to illustrate these stories, these teaching points, these lessons that we want to bring to life in this video. In Layla's case, after going through her distillation exercises, I could really see that she had moved through challenges and gone through transformations that I believe her clients will also want to move through. So I felt that the archetypes of the child and the sovereign were really beautiful ways of illustrating this. So the child represents this openness, this curiosity, this wonderment and element of play that I thought was so important. So I really wanted to highlight this quality about her personality and bring it to life and illustrate it in the visual story itself. Then I want to use the archetype of the sovereign, one that really makes the decision, one who is really in charge of bringing the child's dreams to life, one that is not afraid of sacrifice if that's what it means in order to bring this full transformation to life. And because we were shooting in Hawaii, I thought that it would be a beautiful opportunity to merge the sovereign archetype with Pele, goddess of fire and volcanoes and transformation. And that's why we chose the red outfit for her, to illustrate that element of fire, of Pele, but also keeping the Hawaiian lei that you see initially with the child archetype. Because I wanted that storyline to carry through. I didn't want it to feel too disjointed, like, who's this character now? I wanted the viewer to understand that there was a connection, that these are symbols and archetypes that reflect different parts of who Layla is and parts of her story and transformation. During Layla's interview, she revealed to me how her grandmother had played an instrumental role in introducing her to magic, to the unseen realms, to tarot cards and reading tea leaves. And I wanted to bring this element of her spirituality to the story itself. And so I thought it'd be a very straightforward way to illustrate this simply by having Layla reading her tarot cards. And I had her choose her favorite tarot card, which was, not surprisingly, the Magician. And so I thought that it was perfect to use this magician element as a way of foreshadowing what would happen in Layla's story in this video. So I always like to start with the interview as the first thing that we do. Why? Because it's often the most challenging thing. And I like to get that out of the way, because after it's done, not only do I feel super accomplished, but the client feels super accomplished and relieved that now for the rest of the shoot, we just get to have fun. The interview prep is always really fun for me because most clients, like myself, are not super comfortable on camera. And yet it's so beautiful and surprising to see that once I can break down their walls a little bit and they get a little bit more comfortable in just having that conversation with me, and that's when the gold comes out. So very rarely will I use a teleprompter for a client. Maybe if we're shooting like a sales page video where there has to be very specific and concise dialogue, then we might consider using a teleprompter. But I love to interview my clients because I truly believe that there's magic that comes out in that conversation, and the client feels much more comfortable when they're just talking to me as opposed to trying to memorize these lines that they then need to recite. So now let's cut to a clip where I'll show you some of the interview prep and some of the questions and things that I say to the client to prepare them for the interview. I'm gonna have these big headphones on the whole time, so try not to let them be too distracting. And then just look at me. Don't look at the camera. Just literally ignore the camera.
Okay.
Have a conversation with me.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm going to break our gaze to check the frame. I might take notes, but just keep looking in my direction as if I'm still maintaining eye contact.
Okay.
And generally, we'll go from the back first, the backstory, the history, kind of where you came from, and then we'll meander from there.
Okay. I won't worry too much about detail, just whatever. When you said yesterday that out of all you may get 2 minutes from this, I'm like, okay, cool. And I can just let it go and flow and not worry about it. Okay.
Totally. And I'm listening to make sure that we hit on those key areas. So you just talk like you. Like you just do you and feel natural in it. As you're talking, the mic is pretty sensitive, so just don't do this I know I do that all the time, so try not to touch yourself, because it will make a thumping sound. If you say a response and you're like, oh wait a minute, that's not really how I wanted to express that, just start at the beginning of that sentence again, and then I can get it clean cut from that. So why don't we start with tell us a bit about who you are and what started this journey into therapy, and tell us where that was all ignited from your childhood and coming to be.
Well, that's a pretty big question.
I know it is. And typically we'll talk for about an hour to even upwards of 2 hours long. Depending on where the conversation goes, I always prefer to get more dialogue, so then that way we really have the flexibility to create any type of video in the final edit. It would be such a shame if we traveled all that location, but I had limited actual dialogue and story to be able to use to illustrate the rest of the B-roll. Now let's talk about shot direction. How do I actually direct the client to capture the B-roll shots? It's going to help to illustrate their story. So obviously this will depend on where we're shooting the video. The location impacts how we shoot and what we're able to shoot. Now, fortunately in Hawaii, we have these beautiful beaches, these volcanic rocks, this gorgeous sunset. So how can we not incorporate that into the shots? Especially when we have this archetype of Pele. I really wanted to capture this feminine yet powerful feeling that really illustrates her transformation, because I believe this transformation is so important in her own story because it also mirrors the transformations of her clients that she helps them through. So I love to capture footage at sunset because it is just the most beautiful golden light. And I always get the client to actually be backlit, meaning the sunlight is behind them. And most people will say, aren't you supposed to not shoot things that are backlit? Aren't you supposed to shoot things with like the light on you? Yes, sort of. But when you're shooting B-roll and you want something that's really cinematic and beautiful, I love to shoot backlit because it gives the client, the subject, this beautiful glow behind them. And so essentially I'm positioning them so the sunlight strikes at around, the side of their face, the back of their ear, and it gives them a bit of a glow. Now, in this location, because there is a lot of volcanic rock and also the tide was coming in, one thing that's really important is I will get the client to usually do the same action 3, 4, 5 times because I always want to get different variations and different angles of that same shot. This is really important when it comes to seaming together the actual story so that you are actually taken into the story. You can see their face and then you cut to the action in their hands, and then you can also see the bigger shot of what is happening in that story. If there is only one big master shot and you just see the client or the subject doing their thing from a distance, that makes for a flat visual story. So it's actually a really fun process. I just let them have fun. So right now the lighting is so pretty, and kind of like just if you were to be hedonist right now and be dancing with the wonder of just being out in nature, what would you do?
I do a little jig for the rainbow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So looking up at the rainbow.
I know.
Yeah.
Look at that beautiful rainbow, and I believe that's processing.
I believe so too. And I like to walk my clients through kind of real scenarios that they can imagine and feel into, and that helps to capture the emotion in that moment. With video, I feel like I actually have an advantage as opposed to photography because I can really lead the client through an action. So I would say, let's take a few steps into the ocean, and you're going to be making an offering. You're going to be releasing something, letting go of something. So what does that feel like? And having that element of moving as opposed to posing, I think really helps the client to feel more comfortable during the shoot. And I also really encourage them to just be them. It's rare that I'll give a client an exact pose, unless, say, for example, I'm trying to get an exact shot, like with the stone in her hands. But you'll see in this shot where we actually had a beautiful giant rainbow show up for us, and we saw that as such a beautiful sign and a gift, and we were just so in the moment and just having fun with it. And I think that really shows in the footage as well. So I hope you can tell from the footage that I had a ton of fun with the client in Hawaii, and this worked out to be about a 1.5 day shoot. Most of the footage was captured in the morning and then later on closer towards sunset, because especially in places like Hawaii and really most places in the world, high noon and early afternoon when there's harsh sunlight really doesn't make for great conditions for shooting. So a lot of the indoor footage and interview stuff is then captured in that time. I always like to allocate sunset or sunrise. That is definitely the most beautiful time for footage. And then on the last day, I actually took the drone out shortly after sunrise and flew it along the coast right in front of my hotel to capture some of those waves coming in and the texture of the volcanic rock that I just find so beautiful. And this has actually never happened to me before. I've flown my drone in Mongolia. I've flown it like in the most remote places. And this was actually kind of terrifying when it happened. So I flew the drone out to over the sea where I couldn't even see it anymore with my naked eye. And my iPhone, which is connected to the remote, will usually show me what the drone sees, and I'm able to control it, make it come back, etc. But it told me that it had dropped the connection due to airplane signals or something. And so usually if I waited out a few seconds, if this has happened before in the past, it'll just pass and then I'll be able to continue flying and shooting. But in this case, it dropped the connection completely. And so I was like, oh no, what if my drone just like drops into the ocean? And then I would have lost not only all this footage, but I would have lost the drone. But thankfully, this Mavic Air is so smart, and I've also linked it below if you are interested. It has this like GPS sensor inside that's basically triggered as soon as there's any lost connection. So what it'll do is it'll reset itself and it'll just fly itself back home. And so after a few seconds of panic, I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? I can't go out there and get my drone. Eventually I saw the signal come back and then I can hear it whirring above and it flew back to me. So I was so grateful for this feature. I have taken this drone everywhere. I've never flown it into anything because of its great features that it has auto detection. It'll detect when things are in the way during flight and it'll literally just stop by itself. And with this GPS feature that if it loses connection, it'll just come back to home. So thank goodness for that. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to learn more about video and video marketing and how to be more confident on camera, and hey, just, hang out with me. Come hang out with me in my Facebook group, Video Visibility Mastery. You'll find the link in the description. That's usually where I'm hanging out, where I share more behind the scenes, more tips. And so I hope to see you there. Bye for now, friends.